Hello, everyone. Welcome to Blueprint. My name is Martin, and this is a podcast brought to you by Bench. In Blueprint, we talk about how AI will impact engineering teams, how it is doing so already. Our goal is to democratize AI knowledge to enable ambitious teams to thrive in this new era. And today, my guest is Steven, editor in chief at Develop 3D and producer of the Develop 3D Live conference. Steven, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks, Matt. Thank you.
Awesome. Great to have you on. Steven, would you like to tell us more about how you got into this niche, but big space of engineering and engineering software, and kind of what your role about, at Develop 3D mainly involves?
Yeah, I mean, Develop 3D has been around since 2008. We're not a new company by any means, and the goal was to create a magazine and a sort of community that really embodies what product design is about. There's a lot of design titles and a lot of design magazines back in the day that looked at what designers did, and it was a lot of very sort of fanciful and very sort of inspiration led. Lots of men in turtlenecks and big thick rimmed glasses. But the reality is a lot of people doing some really hard work, some really cool things, and a lot of technology allowing that kind of human creativity to be manifest as a physical manufactured product. So we set around to make a magazine for designers, for engineers, and make it really sort of focus in on that industry, but also open up the sort of different silos of industry into really interesting viewpoints. You know, automotive designers don't really get to chat to jewelry designers. Consumer electronic designers don't really get to chat to, say, marine designers. So we kind of try and build and bring everyone in so they can see what everyone else is doing. And a lot of that is about exciting new technology. And I jumped in, background as a journalist, and really started doing sort of more profiles and interviewing big companies and how they design products. And since then, yeah, I've just found this, probably the best job in the world. Get to go interview exciting new tech companies, exciting product companies, and just sort of really bringing people together.
I presume the last couple of years, there's a lot of noise about AI and kind of how it's changing. So I guess I wanted to start off by asking, see AI kind of really changing game for engineering, for designers. How do you distinguish between what actually is working and what's being implemented versus what is something new?
It's a good question because, as you say, for such a long time, you have a zeitgeist, you have things that are on trend. You have, we've had everything from 3D printing to VR to generative design, and everything has come as the big game changer, which is always the marketing term that everyone hates. Everything's a game changer. AI is a different beast in that it has come quickly, but it seems to iterate and move so much faster. This is different for every sort of silo that we cover because we cover everything from sketching and concepting right through to high-end simulation and engineering. But it is moving so quickly, and everything you think you know might be out of date by a week's time, 2 weeks. It's scary as a journalist to try and write about something that quick moving because you try and think that you know what you're talking about, but things move. So keeping on top of what people we speak to, correspondence we have with companies, and from users and tech companies alike, we kind of figure out that some companies might be around and be key players, and some might just be a fleeting flash in the pan and might disappear after a couple of months even. So we're trying to find that balance, find out what works, and see who's going to be around. Previously, a startup that maybe got a huge amount of investment, a Y Combinator or a big Nvidia investment would be, we can look at them and they'll work, and we know that they're going to grow and be a part of the industry. But now, even big investments have failed, and small companies without the big backing are doing amazing things. So it's new territory, and I think we all really find out by chatting to more users what they want to get more of an idea about what might stick in the long term.
So how do you judge which comics are really? Is it the ones that get actual user adoption and actual traction with big enterprises? Is that what makes a company quote unquote real in this case?
Well, adoption is interesting because it's so new, a lot of these products, that users don't really want to talk about it because it's their competitive edge. They might have a lot of products, they might have a lot of add-ins, they might use all kinds of different things at different stages of their design workflow. But at the moment, everyone is kind of keeping it under their hats in a case of we don't really want to tell too many people. We have some speakers that developed 3D Live this year who are definitely using some AI technology, but they won't talk about it on stage, and they haven't in articles that we've done with them because that's their keeping them ahead of the game. So again, it's difficult. I mean, adoption is what wins. If people are using the product, that is the product that we want to look at, and that is the product that everyone should be looking at. But like I say, there's a new company every week appears with something magical, and that's the thing is the key thing about AI is it is almost like magic. Some of the things it can do. When you've sat here for nearly 2 decades looking at people working very hard, grinding sometimes to achieve results that are amazing, that there's now something that almost at the push of a button or a few prompts can replicate that, and that's both incredible but also a bit scary. So yeah.
Really. Hard to. So you mentioned that as a journalist, sometimes it's very hard to keep up with the industry, how it's developing, and how fast things are changing. But I feel like there could be a bit of a split between your reality as a journalist and the clients and users' reality as a big automotive company. I guess I wanted to check in with you to see what is that split? What is that, I guess, that delta? So a lot of the companies we speak to, they either don't yet use any generative AI, or they're happy that they just got a ChatGPT license for the enterprise, right? So, and on our side, right, on our side as a bench as a startup, and on your side as a journalist, I'm sure we're like 10 years in the future, almost living in the world where engineers are almost not needed. Not quite there, right? But that's kind of a parabola. How do you see that? How do you see that dichotomy?
That gap of adoption, I think someone's called it before. Yeah, because where we have to be as what we do as a role is be at the front and be looking to see what is coming through the windscreen, whereas a lot of companies, whatever size, are holding back. We all know there are companies out there using a CAD package that is maybe a decade old because they daren't upgrade, or they might lose all their data, and there's too much fear and risk involved in that. And how they will adopt AI tools is incredibly complicated because you can't put AI into something that's maybe 15 years old. So how is that going to work, and why aren't they using the latest package? I think the AI is one of those things that helps companies move faster. This is why it's such a different thing. It's going to be such a gulf in performance. It's not like you're offering 100 times faster, whatever. You're offering maybe the power of having 3 more design teams within your company, which is incredible. It's such a gulf in performance or opportunity, even, that companies are now going to have to start thinking. Like, it was a company like Onshape, for example, is now 10 years old, probably more now. And it came with Cloud CAD, and everyone's like, oh, we couldn't move to the cloud. We can't risk that, blah, blah, blah. And 10 years on, there are still, like you say, still companies that are not going to move to the cloud because we have reasons. We have siloed data, and we have all kinds of security worries or whatever it is. But to use AI, you're going to have to be using more things in the cloud. You're going to have to start using more powerful software and more new software. And we're starting to see people moving now. They're piecing this together, and they're realizing if we want to get ahead or remain ahead of our competitors, we're going to have to shift how we operate. And a lot of that is their technology stack and how that's going to fit into their workflow.
I'm always curious about, I guess, your read in this case. How many teams do you see actually using generative AI in their workflow? Of course, I think a good amount use AI, maybe some graph neural networks, or some AI accelerated simulations, or an AI in the more machine learning kind of format. But we still rarely see any teams talk about generative AI beyond ChatGPT. I want to get your read on Could you estimate a percentage of teams that actually have taken the jump? Or like, is there any way you can shed some light on?
I mean, we cover every industry from, say, like jewelry and watchmaking through to automotive, through to spaceships. I think the biggest thing we've ever covered is a cruise ship, which is, it's like building a city that floats and has systems. So you get the idea that there's a huge swathe of different industries that we cover, and some of them are definitely using a lot of AI. Automotive in the concepting stage, for example, and styling and things like that. There are some amazing generative AI tools for visualization and rendering and those kinds of things that are helping people to move faster. And the demand is there in automotive. They want to go from 7 years to 5 year to 3 year design cycles. They've got to find and move quickly. In things like aerospace, there's a lot more sort of compute-based, design and engineering happening. Aerospace is looking at more CFD, taking all that simulation and distilling it into what shapes are the most optimized. So I think there's a lot of scope there as well. Other people are probably less inclined. There's a lot at the front end, the concept end. There's probably a lot in the simulation end. Piecing it together, the CAD companies, like we've spoken about there, a lot of them have a lot of legacy users. A lot of them have legacy installs, and that's not moving as fast. We've seen recently Dassault Systems and announcing their sort of AI co-pilots and AI agents are a new thing with in all the big brands and all the big software companies. But apart from sort of maybe offering some assistance, we're not seeing a lot of chatting to the computer and it designing a shape for you. And there are companies out there doing that, and there are companies out there designing new kernels that will take advantage of this and things like that. I think that's it's hard to gauge when that will have an impact, when that will kick in. SolidWorks is the most used CAD package in the world, and all their presentations at their big user event last month were based on AI and AI agents and things. But most of their users aren't geared up or on the right license to use any of that. Now, whether that'll flip, whether having that ability, and I think some of the things they showcased were amazing. So whether that's going to say, oh, we could do more now, we should change our license and change how we use CAD. And that could happen in 5 years. That could happen in 5 months. People could really ramp it up. So it's just a case of figuring out where it's going to go and how fast. But yeah, there's definitely some really cool, really useful applications today.
What was the coolest feature or part of their product that the Souls showed on their?
I mean, they showed. I think Leo is the most focused for the SolidWorks users. So they have Aura, Leo, and Marie. They're sort of 3 AI agents at the moment. Leo is the one for engineering, and it allows you to sort of spec your problem, and it can create designs and engineer, structures or anything really, it seemed. Which I think is nice because the designer's skill set is not clicking and dragging lines and creating shapes on a CAD package. Their skill set is their brain. And I think we're going to see a sort of separation from people that are maybe just very good and very quick at modelling things in CAD compared to the engineers that are actually the brains and they have this sort of the creativeness to think about new problems and new ideas and how they can solve things. So yeah, it was really interesting to see on the stage, and they're partnering with things like Nvidia and things like that. It shows that these companies are taking things very seriously with AI, not just because their shareholders expect to see AI now. We've talked about it being like the zeitgeist, and everyone wants to see AI in everything. Every press release I get is some mention of AI somewhere. But there's really sort of people wanting to use it in anger and make things and do things really positively.
Actually, on this topic, what I'm curious about is, given your visibility into the big incumbents, right, like Autodesk or Dassault or whichever one, and your visibility to startups. Of course, a lot of startups are trying to tackle Gen AI. Who do you think is better positioned to win long term, and where do you think each of them has an advantage?
I mean, I think I'll start with the problem to begin with. I mean, the problem that a lot of users see is they look at a startup and they think that's an amazing, whatever the generative AI skill set is that it provides, that's really incredible. But do we invest in that, or do we assume that one of the big incumbents will have that in their new release in 6 months' time? So that's one thing that I've seen, that looks like a really cool tool, but then might SolidWorks, Onshape, Creo, whatever it is, have that in their software package, their next release, because these are big teams, these are big companies with lots of investment. I think Dassault had a bill of something like 1.2 billion in R&D last year. So startups can't compete with that. But additionally, all these companies kind of rely on the foundational models. And, it's a case of, we've seen big companies struggle because they've tried to do things themselves. We've seen, the likes of Adobe produce products that aren't quite as good because they haven't got access to all the information in the world or all the images, compared to, say, their visualization and generative AI for rendering isn't as good as Nano Banana Pro to whatever version we're on to now, because Google has so much more information to draw on, whereas Adobe has a lot, but not as much. So a lot of the big incumbents are going to, well, they're already jumping into bed with some of the foundational models. Dassault has Mistral, and now they've just announced NVIDIA. Autodesk are investing into companies as well to try and get their skill set and enable that into their users. It's going to depend on, we're going to see a lot of upheaval and a lot of money spent, I think, from the big companies trying to do cool new things at scale. Whereas a lot of startups have lots of amazing new tools that we might see a huge mergers and acquisitions period of this. It's what happens typically. For the user in the middle, though, where do you put your money? Do you go with the startup? Do you hold out with what you already have and hope that they advance fast enough that you don't get left behind? So it's a really, really interesting period.
The companies that take the swing on a startup actually now, and it actually works, these are the companies that can actually then win in their competitive market.
Yeah.
And the ones that wait out for a SolidWorks or for a Onshape to release the future could be right, but in the meantime, you could be losing your edge to their competitor.
Yeah, I think now is a great time to be looking at startups. I think now is a great time to be looking at what is new. And I know a lot of users are looking at trying to get ahead, like we spoke about earlier. It's companies want to get ahead now. They realize that this is, my background is also, I was a history grad, and I said a lot about the industrial revolutions and things like that. We're living through one now, which I find brilliant. I find really exciting and interesting. A bit scary, but there's going to be a lot of upheaval, a lot of changes, and a lot of companies now see this as their time. This is their time to get ahead. This is their time to pick up on something new that might let their company take off. So I don't dissuade anyone from going to look at a startup and go and look at a new piece of technology that might just fit that little piece of their workflow and make a huge change. So sitting around, I don't think anyone's sitting around waiting for the big incumbents to bring in features. It's nice when they arrive, but if you're using the big incumbent software already, you're probably not, looking to get that edge as much as, say, a smaller company that's maybe trying to be a bit more agile and maybe, has a shorter shelf period.
And from what you're seeing out there today, I guess beyond potentially waiting for the what is stopping managers or directors or VPs from adopting? Are they scared of something? Is there a process issue, or is it just time is needed to get it through?
I think I saw some survey data a while back, and it's people, the users, the designers, the engineers, they want to be using new tools. They want to be using the latest software, the latest hardware. They always want the new things. There's a layer above them that is possibly the thing slowing them down, which is the people withholding the money, with the purse strings, or the people that are managing maybe their IT structure, and about how they might be able to onboard new software is a big issue. So I think a lot of people, like I said before, a lot of people have a lot of legacy data and a lot of legacy things that they don't really fancy tackling tidying up. It's like seeing some tidying around the house, and you don't really feel like doing it right now. You'd rather sit on the settee and watch TV. It's a bit like that. Oh, this is a big problem, and it's a big, expensive problem for a lot of companies as well. I think learning and doing your research early is really important. Finding out what a lot of companies are doing and what they can offer, and getting the chance to sort of really kick the tires of what these new companies can do is really important right now. I think people need to learn what's happening and what is new and keep on top of it, which is hard to do when you've got a full-time job and you're designing products and you're working with teams around the world or whatever it is you're doing. So keeping on top of things is really important right now, because you might miss a trick, you might miss what's new and what could really do your company justice.
What we found super interesting in a couple of our chats, to your point about IT teams, stakeholders, all the back, but basically the floor, we heard them say they are at a stage now where they know they have to adopt LLMs. They have to get over, quote unquote, their fear of sharing data. They don't know how yet, but they know they have to do it. It's a very interesting time in the market where startups or companies get to almost educate or co-author those pieces of, I guess, work, or those pieces of strategy on how to make sharing data with LLMs or large models secure and safe.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I mean, I think most of the companies we speak to nowadays have a cloud-first procurement process. So for every other element of their company, whether it's their HR department, their office department, whatever it is, they have to look at tools that work on the cloud, and they're happy doing that. They're happy with the security of that. They're happy with what that offers their staff and their distributed collaborative things that they need to do in their business. When it comes down to their IP and their design and what is their product, people are a lot more defensive. Someone put it to me recently, "Is like, do you let your design staff use Google? Google search, what's this, that, and the other in your company?" And everyone's like, "Yeah, of course." Well, then that is technically AI. AI, sorry, it is. The AI function in Google now. I use more than reading through all the offers. I read a little synopsis and I find things from that. If you're willing to let your staff use that AI function, and you're happy with that security level, and you're happy with that, other departments in your company using cloud-based, maybe AI tools to do other functions in your company, you need to move faster, because also your competitors around the world are not going to sit back as slowly as you are. We sit here, we look at China, for instance. China is not messing about. The companies there are just using whatever there is to get ahead, and that's fine. But everyone's sat here predicting huge progress from countries within Africa, say, and they're going to do that from farming to high tech transition that China did in maybe 30 years. They're going to do that in maybe 10 years. So you're not just going to be competing with your next door neighbour on the same industrial park. You're not going to be competing with a company in Germany if you're in London. You're not going to be competing with just China. You're competing on a global platform now. And all these new companies aren't going to be messing around. And they're not going to be sat there thinking, someone could maybe take some of our information. It's such a different mindset, and I think a lot of companies are so fearful of their traditional IP trademarking, yada yada. They need to sort of really be bold, and I think that's really what it's going to come down to.
that's a great point. And I think some companies are really feeling that this is potentially an existential question for them. I think Colab released a paper or like a recent Colab software recently, where I think they said something in the range of 25% of companies are adopting AI within companies in the next 1 to 2 years is an existential, which I think is the level of urgency and seriousness you need in this time, because it really could be. Really could be. I think many are not not aware of or not kind of conscious of there could be a huge reshuffling in the global top automotive aerospace.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at automotive, for instance, given how the world, the market of European brands and American brands are now, we're now not flooded with Chinese models, but they're coming, and there's lots and lots of them, and they're developing those cars far faster than any European company is, and that's why we see Volkswagen and other companies scrambling to try and reduce their design and engineering process down to fewer and fewer years. Those Chinese companies, they're not messing about, and they are going to use whatever the best technology is at that point. And thinking about how you're going to compete against that, it's like a company's just gone, I don't care about the rules anymore, and we're going to go as fast and as hard as possible. Then the legacy companies that have had the luxury of sitting on big piles of IP and trademarks and patents and things, and having legacy is they're going to suffer, and they're all waking up about it now. And excitingly, we're seeing a lot of new companies. We have a company called Kaikaku, and a company called Avant Design, speaking at Develop 3D Live, and these are small teams, really young teams as well, and they're getting ahead and building a name for themselves, and they're using a lot of different technologies, because they see that this is how we're going to get our ideas into the real world, and that's going to build our business. So it's not just, you're competing against China and whatever comes down the road, but you're also competing against a lot of very new companies, and they're not hanging around. Also, I think budget as well. A lot of us have got used to, big companies have got used to spending very large amounts of money on their software and their outlay. And there's a lot of startups that offer a lot of facilities, a lot of skill sets and tools that maybe at a cheaper price point. So maybe taking a collective view of that rather than, we're going to have to stump up tens of thousands of pounds to renew our big Siemens PTC Autodesk Dassault license this year. There's options there now. There's far more options and far more sort of fluid workflows that can be built from little pieces from different places, rather than jumping onto one big platform and hoping that it does all the things you want from it.
So you're saying we could see a bigger fragmentation of a consolidated, oligopolistic, market?
I think we're going to see, I think we'll see lots more fragmented for the short term. I think that the bigger companies will come around and hoover up a lot of smaller companies, or develop.
Grow by acquisition, right? So
yeah, I mean, I think I look at some companies now and I'm imagining why isn't an Autodesk buying that company? Why isn't Siemens taking that in house? Because that would fit their user base or whatever it is. And I think some are just holding out. These startups are holding out because they know they've got something special. They know they've got a really good product that can really work in a broader sense. But yeah, I think the mergers and acquisitions will come. But I'd like to think that because of this, we're going to get a lot of new companies doing a lot of exciting things that maybe grow themselves and maybe build out their product market. I mentioned Onshape earlier, sort of 10 or so years ago, appeared and were this brand new thing, but then PTC bought them. I expect now there's going to be that many new products. They can't buy everyone. They can't pick up everything. So I think it's an exciting time. It's a confusing time, and I think people need to sort of do their research and find out, is it worth investing? But they're going to have to be quicker about it as well, because you haven't got time to do that. Or we'll test it for so many months and we'll try a competitor and whatever it is, because these softwares in 6 months' time might be a completely different product, and we've seen that with products already.
One last question on the AI topic. So we talked a lot about what the companies are building, but do you have any, if you were to pick one or two things or features or workflows that the customers are actually asking for, the things that they're actually in pain about every single day, they're trying to get away to get out of doing that already? Is there anything you could point us towards? What that could be?
Be struggling. I mean, it's the Daft Punk equation. It's the harder, better, faster, stronger. Everybody wants to move at pace with fewer, let's call them, software nightmares, crashes, whatever it is, and they want to collaborate with stakeholders easier. People are using more tools than ever now to do things. They're using a mix of, polygons, NURBS, and even down to sort of voxel level design now, and they're trying to bring all that into sort of one company. They're trying to bring in a million different things and output a million different things to different people in their companies or their stakeholders. Clarity, speed, and economy of use is what they want. And also a lot of things to do with the AI side of things is also eliminating the mundane, eliminating the things that aren't actually the skill set, that frees up designers and engineers to do more useful things, more profitable things as well. We're looking at, say, just visualization as an example. What used to take one visualization designer a week to do, they can now do 200 of the same things in the same time. So therefore, by having that time, they can now go and they can go look for more business. They can go and speak to their customers more. You can have more face-to-face time, more time to discuss things, find out what customers really want, or what, do more research into what consumers really want. Build those relationships, go and look for a new factory that can maybe do something better than the one you've been using for 10 years because you've just not had time to go and look at resources or look at different things. There's so much. Everyone wants more time. And by doing things faster, you're going to have more time. So using that time efficiently is going to be a big change for a lot of companies. Also, it's going to mean a lot of companies don't need to be as big and have as many staff. So it's a constantly sort of up and down shifting thing. We need better collaboration tools because we have a huge team. But then also our team's going to get smaller maybe, or we're going to have more AI agents doing more things. So then how do you communicate with that? There's a lot there.
We really think that the future of the engineering job is really similar to what it turned out to be in software, where essentially engineers become more architects and kind of the in the weeds execution. Right now, many engineers I know, software engineers, don't really directly write code anymore. Speak to the agent about code. I really think long term, a similar thing is going to happen. I think it's a much, much harder task just because of how many different workflows there are, how many different tools you do engineering in versus in coding where it's just one code development tool. But I think ultimately that's where we have to reach. I think the first sign of it maybe.
I think this is the biggest challenge for AI in this industry. Product development is, making physical things is probably the biggest ones. Because we say there's so many different areas for data, and what the data format is as well isn't really good for AI to work with, and that'll change as well. I thought we'd have a lot longer before AI started really hammering on our door and changing how workflows are happening. And I'm pleasantly surprised to say it's not. It's been a really short period that people are now doing things. And that's only going to get faster. And that's the thing with, like I mentioned at the start of this, the AI, its turnaround time, its development time, its ability to train itself time is just so quick that if anyone is sat back thinking, they've got time to think about this, they really don't. They've got to be thinking about this like now, preferably last year. But that's too late now. You can't change that. So, yeah, it's really all about moving as fast as possible.
Absolutely. To close off, I think AI has been the most common word in our. But with your broad exposure to the market, I think it would be a huge waste not to ask you, what is the other thing outside of AI that you're seeing in the market happening now that you find extremely exciting?
I think I'm seeing it is the move. It's the excitement and the move towards maybe not entirely new software, but moving from the old big products to maybe thinking about moving, because to move previously was such a big ask. You're asking to change, training, and there's all these kind of requirements. We're seeing big companies now moving to what was previously challenger software, or when it was first launched, maybe viewed as hobbyist software. We're seeing, Autodesk Fusion, Onshape, Siemens Accelerator platform, which is a sort of like, online lighter version of things. There's a lot there happening, and that's really interesting to see, because previously we never thought people would down those tools. They're what they had previously. People are moving, and I think that is not just for the capabilities of AI, although that's a big driver, but we're seeing a lot of people just sort of changing how they work. And I think, with the pandemic and everyone sort of distributed teams, that was a big move in a different direction. But the need to have more compute power, the need to try and do things faster is really driving people to look at what tools they're using now.
Kind of questioning our previous assumptions and being more open to
Yeah, I think people are just they've they're making the jump to try and get ahead, because they know what is coming. They know that there's this wave of change is happening now, and we're just getting the first effects of it, but it's going to happen, and they know they need to be prepared and set out their stall now for the next 5 years. Previously you set out a stall for 10 years, 20 years of how your company's going to, your 5-year plan, your 10-year plan. Like, people need to be looking a lot shorter term and start thinking about how we're going to either get ahead, keep up, or change, what we do.
Exciting times, scary times for many, for sure. But there's going to be a lot of change, a lot of new reshuffling and yeah, improvement hopefully happening. Steven, this was great. Thank you very much for your time today. We're very excited to see you in person in 3 weeks, I believe.
Yeah, 25th of March.
25th of March. So to all the listeners, if you would like to join, is there any specific website that anybody listening should go to learn more about Develop 3D or 3D Live?
Develop3dlive.com is the event website, and you can see all our speakers and keynotes and what tech companies will be there, including Bench. But also develop3d.com is the main website, and where you can get free subscription to the magazine that we produce, and all kinds of information that can help keep you ahead.
Steven, thank you very much once again. Great having you on, and best of luck.
Thanks, Martin.